They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole we found. And I was thinking,
hi, this is Nico. You're listening to my dad Rafal, also known as the White Rabbit, and James Jardine on the one and only Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Buckle up and enjoy.
deep into this pool of regrettable situations. Pitch black, think back to the last time that we were happy.
All right. Man, I need glow sticks for that intro. That's what I need. Yeah, dark room and glow sticks.
That same thing, Raph. I'm just waiting for one time where that's going to be going, and you're going to have, like, it's going to get dark, and the neon lights are going to start coming, and you're going to have either the glow sticks that you're flipping around, or like that ball thing that would expand that people would have.
Oh, yeah.
You need to
All
up
right.
the game, yeah.
All right, folks. Good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole to a post-Christmas holiday edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. You're listening to this just after the Christmas break, or during the Christmas break, holiday break, just after Christmas. I don't know, however, whatever you celebrate, it's during the holidays. And I think we got a holiday gift early because my guest today finally upgraded his 56K line to what I think looks like ISDN now. And so welcome back, Mr. Jeff Collins.
Woohoo! I'm in the 21st century.
What's that?
I'm in the 21st century.
Almost.
Yes. Not my clothing, but my internet connection.
You're coming in from your shop, right?
I am.
The Collins bunker? I like it.
Yes. It's very festive at this time of year.
Nice. I can see all the festivities.
Yeah.
The former pine trees of old are used to make your walls.
Yeah, they're very nice back there.
How you doing, James?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to another episode here. I think this is going to be fun.
Yeah, we've had some decent stuff going on lately after that little break where I decided that I didn't want to be on mainland US for a while. And so now we're coming back strong. So today's episode really is all about, we just went through Christmas, right? People give gifts. You probably got a lot of gadgets that you put turned on and boop, it says, hey, how about what's your Wi-Fi password? And whether that just applies to your house, some of you take your gadgets to work. I think the question to ask is, at what did we already hit the tipping point, or are we close to where everything that we buy is presumed to be on the internet, not necessarily not on your internal line, but just on the internet? That's the presumption. It'll be out on the internet. It'll get an public IP address. It'll be publicly addressable. And if so, what does that mean? And what should we be thinking about? So, Jeff, I think I wanted to bring you for this because we need the right amount of snark for this, and I can think of few other people qualified to provide the perfect amount of over the top snarkism for this. So I'll ask you: do you think we're there, or are we almost there? Or did we already get there and we just didn't notice yet?
Well, I think we're there, and I think a lot of it that got us here is really buyers driving it. If you think about why are so many devices connected today? Why is so much of what we deal with connected? It's because buyers want it. They want to be able to interact with it. They want to be able to use it. They want to be able to do those things. And with that, we create risk for all of us. Anytime something becomes connected, risk, ultimately entails, whether that's software related or hardware related or interface related. You think about Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or even an LTE or a 5G modem that exists. All those things create that risk. And I think, within all those areas, that's why we've kind of ended up in this position. And that, it's kind of why, as we think about, devices, if you think about 20 years ago, all of us thought from an IPv4 perspective that we would never be able to have machines that were capable of using every single IPv4 address. Let's call it 1 billion addresses. Well, then we went past that. And so then we decided, okay, well, now we need to have IPv6. And we need to have, a multitude more, because we could have trillions of devices. And I think that's really what we're going after right now, is this ecosystem of where effectively everything that's out there gets connected. And with that, we end up with these risks that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
How many of these devices, though, end up like actually sitting out as an endpoint on your system? Like if I were to scan your public facing IP, like I would actually see these, because a lot of the things that we get, yes, they call out via API to some service someplace, but they're not necessarily endpoints hanging off that are an exposure point from that aspect, right? Like they pull, but they're not just open to receive connections.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you think about, especially in our homes, we have a TV that sits behind our firewall that we bought at the Walmart. And, we have, yeah, it's from Walmart.
Okay.
It's really super legit secure. It was made by the Taiwanese, and then the Chinese hacked into it before it got to Walmart, and then I bought it and put it in my home.
Nice.
So yeah, that's what I have. But if you think about that, most of the devices we have in our homes sit behind that. They're at least NATed. They don't have a public IP attached to them. But if we go outside of our homes, back to that 1 billion IPv4 addresses, we have IoT devices out there. Those are certainly publicly addressed in most regards. We have IoT devices that sit in the industrial space. We have IoT devices that sit in a lot of arenas that have non-public IP addresses, but a lot of them end up with public IP addresses. They end up with a public IP connecting in through a modem or something like that, and they sit right out on the internet, and we run into that risk across the board. And so, that's one piece. Although I will argue in many regards that even those machines that aren't publicly addressed, they still have a huge possibility of having a vulnerability in them or a risk for us, just because of the way that software gets pushed to them, the way that they interact within our environments, the way that they communicate, all those types of things. And I mean, we've seen risks where people have been able to break into the back-end orchestration platforms of these manufacturers, break into those devices and leverage that for communication. So those are all still risky avenues, even though they don't have a public IP.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say, James, to answer your question slightly differently, every light socket and light bulb that I get, you can scan it. It's got ports open. Now, I'm not putting them on the internet, obviously. So they're not mobile. My TV isn't mobile. I'd consider them internal-ish, but they have internet access, and they're addressable inbound because they connect via API to something, and something can talk back to them, right? Initiate it. However, they check in and get instructions, that kind of thing. So there's that. But think about all the just whatever you're buying kids these days, like your Amazon Echoes, my kids have iPads. Those now almost all these devices come with LTE or 5G connectivity, as do things like your cameras, your iPads, tablets, kids' toys. Like things are more and more. They used to come with Ethernet, and then they came with Wi-Fi, and now they're coming. Almost the vast majority are moving into LTE or 5G connectivity. Is that changing anything? Because I think that one of you guys mentioned it. The way we deliver everything from management to updates to looking at security of these devices, that actually matters, and it changes.
Did you want me to answer that one, Raf, or is that one
I decided I was going to put that out there and see if either of you guys wanted to take that.
I would love James's thoughts on this one first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm okay doing. I think it's an interesting thing to see how we make those changes, right? Because if you're going to take a device and say no longer is it going to your network, it's now a separate network, right? Like if I connect my device and say I'm only going to connect it over LTE, or my cellular connection, and it's not connected to my network at all, right? That's a different scenario versus I'm going to connect it to LTE, but I'm also going to connect it to my Wi-Fi, right? Because now I got two connections, and my device probably sits most of the time connected to both. When you think about like your iPhones, right? Like you have them connected to your Wi-Fi, you have them connected to the other. So it's interesting to think about how that gets around some of the things, right? Like you've got the firewall to protect you on your network, but what's there to protect you on cellular? Is there anything equivalent that's doing that? So now all of a sudden, if you're attacked through cellular, but you're also piggybacking Wi-Fi, like, is that a way around, like, into that network? You know, I think that's where it starts to get interesting, because on one hand, you're taking me off the network and saying, hey, you're just cellular, like whatever. Like, okay, you got my device. It's a standalone piece. It's sitting there. Yes, it's a phone. It's key to everything, but it's not attached to my corporate network. It's not attached to my home network. It's not attached to anything. I think it starts getting interesting when you start attaching to both, right? And I'm now tethered to cellular and Wi-Fi. I've got two ways in. And I think that opens up a little bit more, because I don't think the corporate has, I don't know what, I'm not a network person, right? So I don't know what their ability is to say, oh, you're on this, but we're going to block what you do if you're on Wi-Fi. Like, I'll go down to cellular, I'll go download this malicious stuff or go visit this site, and then I'll switch back to Wi-Fi, right? Like, I've tainted my machine. Now I'm back on the network, right? Like, it's harder, I think, to put guide rails around that.
Well, I think in that regard, James, I think that's a really good point, because I think one of the things we also have to think through is, you know, when you go and you buy a TV or you go and buy something else connected like that this holiday season, you know, generally your apps that you're going to install on are pretty relatively well controlled. You know, you might go and download Netflix's app, or you might go and download Amazon's app for, you know, their Prime Video or something like that. And those are relatively well-controlled apps, at least on the surface. Now, Netflix may have the worst developers of all time, and it's just a huge joke for all of us, and they're trying to infect us all through their, you know, video streaming service. But, you know, who knows about that one? But if we think about our phones, you know, our phones, for most people, hopefully not the people who listen to this podcast, but for all the other people who don't listen to this, they're going to download anything on their phone. You know, if they get a new widget or a new app that tells them that, hey, you can go talk to your neighbor, and your neighbor doesn't even know about it by downloading XYZ app ABC, they're going to download that tomorrow, and they're going to give them all their personal information and do everything in the world for that, and use the same password that they use for their banking app, which is the best way to do it. Because then if LastPass gets compromised, you don't have to worry about it. Your data wasn't even there. You just use the same password on everything. Great security tidbit. So, but back to my point, you know, if your phone gets compromised, you know, it does open up that possibility. And it's one of those things that at the holiday season, I think all of us have that risk, especially those of us with kids. You know, we've got kids who are, you know, getting new devices for the holiday season. They're getting devices that we can't control, because the vast majority of the time they're out and about running around, you know, using their phone, not inside of the four walls, not behind our super secure Walmart router. And because of that, you know, there's a lot of risk. Now, there's platforms out there for that. You know, you could go download a Net Nanny or any of those individual platforms to kind of control it. But those platforms, by and large, generally only control what you can install. And, you know, if you make a mistake and you allow your kid to install an app, let's say it's that XYZ ABC app, and you don't know, you think it's probably safe, and so you allow it, and then 3 weeks later it becomes compromised, and then that gets leveraged to attack your home network through the Wi-Fi connection, and now you're in a world of hurt. And so I think all these things, especially at this time, I think all of us need to be at much higher alert, because we're just adding in a lot more of those connected devices, and we can end up in a bigger world of hurt within that.
Do you think people have died, like, not died down, but like lost a little bit of the hype around the idea of devices like this? Because one, everything does have it. Two, like you said, Jeff, it has it because we want it. Like, people want this stuff. And three, do we really see a huge amount of effect? Like, at a personal level of somebody doing something, getting a new device, and it actually having some sort of negative outcome on them. I mean, I watch a lot of news, like where you see the breach reports and stuff like that. And it's not that common that you're seeing, oh, I got this device for Christmas and, you know, I got hacked immediately through it. Like we've seen things like the nanny cams, you know, that got hacked, and, you know, for whatever reason they did, whether that was people using their same credential as their bank across all their different sites, you know, or somebody being close enough to be able to get directly into it. But people, I don't think, see a repercussion because you're not seeing a lot of big news around, oh, you had this device and XYZ happened, right? I mean, do you guys see that type of stuff where, you know, if I were to look at my parents and they're like, hey, I'm going to get this thing, it connects, they're not seeing any negative repercussions around doing it because it doesn't seem like it's that often it happens.
No, but I think what I don't think we realize. So I'm going to bring it back to, I don't think we realize how much of the stuff that we have is on the internet or is connected. My example is when switching from one wireless mesh to another, going through and re-adding everything. Like I dumped out all the things that I had, and I'm like, okay, how many of these things do I have? Literally like 30 some odd things pull IP addresses in this house. That's before my kids turn everything on. And so there's just a tremendous amount of stuff. And I'm sort of interested in how, yes, it's out there. Yes, it's becoming more and more connected by default, right? It's connected by default. It used to be, oh, you can connect this, but it'll take an extra, charge, or it'll be, you have to get an add-on. Then it became, the add-on is basically free. You just got to pay for the connectivity. Now it's like, it's all bundled together. It's online whether you want it or not. I dare you to buy a TV today that's not internet connected. I mean, you got to try really hard. And
well, I saw Raf someplace. I don't know if this is true, but it was giving a breakdown of like why you could buy that 85-inch TV for $200.
I've seen that. Yeah,
it's because you're not paying for the TV, right? Like
that's right.
They're getting their money not from you buying the merchandise.
That's right.
From selling your information, right? And that's with right. Everything. Like that's why everything is going to be connected, because it's data people want. Like I'll give you the device, you can use it for free all you want. It's that like your habits and behaviors and all that stuff. Like that's what we want to build, or be able to push advertising down, because there's probably no money in actually just selling a Fitbit.
That's right.
Right. Like
well, well, what's interesting then, right, is and then what's next? And this is the part. This is a two-parter. Then, Jeff, I'll pitch this over to you. Is how the hell in your house? I think it's probably easier. It's reasonably easier to control until you have teenagers, in which case they know how to get things on your network and bypass you, and it's over. But I'm thinking like at the office or in their remote office situation or whatever, you've got these devices that can ostensibly bridge the private and the corporate world relatively easily, right? So without installing NAC on everything, how do you do that? Right, and I think we covered a little bit of that on the SSC, SASE, whatever that word, zero trust world. So that's part one. Part two is from a device perspective, because we need to scan them, we need to identify missing patches and track them and all this stuff. Okay, how? Besides the word manually?
Yeah, I think from all of your questions, I think it brings up an interesting discussion topic. I will argue, though, that in your house, it's probably not as easily controlled either. I think all of us have fallen into that phase as well. You go and you buy a light switch, and you're like, you know what? I would love to be able to turn on and off that light switch when I'm in Valley next year. And so you buy it, you connect it to the internet, and then you forget about it. Because last I checked, most of us aren't turning on and off our lights with our phones on a general daily basis. So we buy it to connect it and use it for Valley in a year. We forget about it. Something happens to that switch in 6 months. We don't even realize that we bought that GE switch that was now compromised. That's 100% going to affect everything that you have. And none of us remember it. None of us know about it. And we totally forget about it. Now, when we get into the office ecosystem, I think we run into that exact same scenario. I think the piece that's hard for an office, and you hit the nail on the head, Raf, it's today we deal with all of this manually. You think about vulnerability management. How do most companies do vulnerability management? On a spreadsheet, which is by far the greatest way to do things like that. When I have millions of line items, I want to put it in rows of a spreadsheet, and then in each column, I'm going to put things that are super dynamic, like what day did I install this device? And who owns that device? And oh, by the way, the person who owns that device quit the company 13 years ago. And so all those things are going to go in our spreadsheet to manage all these vulnerabilities. And then in addition to the vulnerabilities we have on things like laptops and PCs, which we generally know more about, we're also going to add in all these intelligent devices that we're going to connect to our Wi-Fi that we know nothing about. Oh, and that also cost about $12, so that each time there's any problem with them, we're just going to throw them away and we're going to buy another one and connect it in as well. And maybe we'll actually disconnect it, maybe we won't. We'll just leave it there. It'll kind of be like Russian roulette for our network. And so we can do all these things going on. And I think that's one of the things that's really tricky is that, as we go down these paths, dealing with these risks for everything that we deal with that's really important to the business is hard. And now we're instituting all these other things into our network and into our infrastructure that's noticeably harder, i.e. exponentially harder, like IoT. And we have no methodology of dealing with the easy stuff. And I know it's not easy, but it's certainly easier than what we're talking about here.
It's an interesting point you bring up, Jeff, about the cheapness of devices, right? The ability to be able to swap it out, be like, no, I'm not going to fix it. I'm just going to replace it. I got my associates in electronic engineering, and as I was going through my program, right after my program, they switched. They said, we're not doing electronic engineering, we're doing computer engineering, because we don't need people to go work on boards, right? It's too expensive to go replace a resistor, troubleshoot the board, replace a resistor, just replace the board. And now we're getting to that point here where it's like, listen, everything's so inexpensive that TV in the conference room, something glitched with it, boom, we replace it. We don't fix a TV, we replace a TV. But, we have enough trouble sunsetting applications and servers and stuff like that. Now bring in all these other small devices. And how are we managing that? Hey, we pulled that off. And you go look at your network list and you're like, what is this? What is this? And they're never named anything you can understand what they are. If I go into my network right now and look at all the devices, I can recognize maybe half of the names that are on there, right? Because
you're lucky if you can get half, dude.
Yeah, like they're just made up stuff. You're like, what the heck is this? I got a bunch of stuff that says no name. Like, what the hell is this? And so it makes it really difficult. And I think we overlooked that of how often are we switching out hardware, not from a server level, but from more of these smaller, cheaper device level. Like, how often are we switching it out, but it's never dropping off of the network? Like, it's still got something sitting out there, in our Active Directory or something, and it's still listed in our systems because it just hasn't rolled off yet, right? Like, its IP address has been assigned and it's been sitting there for 3 years because we never roll them off, but that device went out 2 years ago and we replaced it with another.
I was just going to say, it's the same ecosystem that we have in the cloud as well. Hardware becomes ephemeral. And I think that's one of the things that we're starting to wrestle with. We all had to deal with this, let's call it 13 years ago, when most of us started going down the cloud path. We had to wrestle with the same issue. We could stand up a resource and then someone could stand up a new resource. We forgot about the old resource, and then, that other resource became compromised, caused us problems, or it was put on the internet and given an IPv4 address or things like that. And, all those things occurred. And now we're starting to deal with this in hardware. We're dealing with this in these smaller form factor models where, if you think about an IoT device, it's so easy just to swap that out. And it's so easy that, as companies make transitions, one of the biggest things that we see from a device footprint that's publicly accessible is this ecosystem of how networks have changed. If we think about networks holistically, if I go back 20 years, every single customer that is out there, every single company, and every listener who's on here had an MPLS network. That's how they connected every single site that they had. They went and they bought that from AT&T or Verizon or whomever, and they used that network. And that network had no public IPs on it. It was all private IP space. And so if I wanted to connect to my headquarters or my branch, if I was a large bank, I could connect to every single bank branch, and everything was private. Well, then along came these guys who said, you know what, we can do this better. We're going to take a router and we're going to put a firewall component on it, an IPsec. We're going to package it all up. We're going to call it SD-WAN, and we're going to give that to you. And you don't have to buy MPLS anymore. You can buy cheap broadband and you can do all this stuff, and we're going to attach an IP to it. But actually what we're going to do is we're not just going to attach one public IP to it. We're going to take 5 circuits into it. You can buy any circuit that you want. It gets back to like the Walmart model. We buy everything possible and we're going to plug them all in. We're going to give them all a public IP address. And then you're going to have 5 ways to get out, and so much more efficiency to your business. And you're going to save money at the end of the day. But the reality is now we just took our attack surface of our organization, which in MPLS was effectively 0. We've now multiplied that by 5. We've now allocated ports to go in and out. We've allocated the ability for tunnels to go in and out and all these things. And this whole conversation we're talking about with IoT and devices we might buy at the Christmas time world has now just grown exponentially within every organization that's out there. And so, these are all the things that I think all of us always have to wrestle with, because we have these devices that are unknown, these IoT devices, which are generally viewed as unknown assets. We also have a whole bunch of known assets that all of us know about, like we hopefully know about the laptops and the desktops and the servers that we have inside of our environment. But now we have all these network devices that are sitting out there that are totally publicly accessible. And so I think within all these avenues, these are all things that, as we go into 24 and as we look through the past, they're all things we have to wrestle with and figure out how to manage, especially when we have a whole multitude of distinct owners. When we're dealing with servers, we're generally dealing with a server team. When we have laptops and desktops, we're dealing with our endpoint team. And then now we have these whole network elements, and now we're dealing with a network team. And by the way, most network teams that are out there, the people on those teams are getting older. Most of us in the networking space have been in this industry 25, 35 years. We're 55, 60 years old. We want to retire. And so now we've got all these devices now with public IPs, and we're all telling them, what, next year we're going to Bali for perpetuity. We're not coming back. And that's, one of the big things that concerns me.
I think where this gets really ugly, particularly ugly, is that a lot of these devices, unless you have it in your hands all the time, right? Unless it's an iPad or a laptop or a phone. And hell, I got to tell you, I posted this the other day. I'm getting a demo from a company. I thought they had some cool tech, and the engineer is giving a nice browser-based demo. Meanwhile, the top right of his Chrome browser is glowing red, saying, "Hey, restart to apply patch. Come on, anytime now, right?" Because your Chrome goes from green to yellow to orange to like flaming red. And I mean that thing was all about but like pulsing and like shouting, and I'm pretty sure he'd never updated his browser. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, if it's that hard on your browser, I know what my parents do every time their Android tells them, hey, it's a security update. They can't tell the difference between a YouTube kind of a scammy overlay that's trying to get them to install adware or something to take over their phone, because that's happened once, or if it's a legitimate update, so now I got to go over every time. Which is fine, like my parents, but it gets repetitive. My kids don't even think about it, which is scary as hell. They're just like, oh yeah, I need to, Dad, you did this update. Well, I've prevented them from doing anything on their devices without my approval, which makes me the gatekeeper, which means they never stop asking. And eventually I'll get fatigued. But like, what about my light sockets? What about, the other things in my house here? My like, I'm thinking to myself, when is the last time I updated that TV that I bought 2 years ago? I actually don't think I've ever run an update. I'm hoping it auto updates itself, maybe, right? I've got the little smart vacuum which cleans up after my kids and my cat. That has software updates. In fact, the last software update they did, the thing went from awesome to basically useless. It was one of the worst software updates in history. But it's on the internet, and now it's changed from, which is nice, right? Now it's changed from manually yelling at you through your phone, the app, to update it, to just saying, hey, I've auto updated. You're on the latest version. Cool. Like it or not, man, you're on the latest. So I think that's a shift, right? That shift of things as they become default connected, they also need to have that default always auto update. Like, don't give the humans the opportunity to screw that up.
Oh, I definitely think we should auto update everything, because auto updates have never hurt anyone in history. So
no, it's never gone bad. What could go wrong?
Like, let's go from consumer devices. Let's just auto update everything: servers, operating systems. Like, this whole world of like Patch Tuesday, total crap. Like, why is anybody updating Microsoft Patch Tuesday? You shouldn't even do that. Let's just set it for auto update. Just take everything. And then every application that we install, auto update them all. Just do them all the time. And just do them like haphazardly. You can do them during the day. Like, we know how to push code during the day. Like, there's like this whole world of like CI and CD. We're like pushing code updates during the day. Let's just do it with our updates. Like SAP, update every day at 12:32 in the afternoon. Doesn't matter what time zone, because it's going to get someone. So just pick it. Like, if Bob's in 12:32 and he's like in England, just throw it right there. Just choose him. Give Bob a little bit of work.
Wait, you haven't been sitting there getting ready to join that call, and all of a sudden the thing pops up and it's like, an update needs to happen, and it needs to happen now, restarting in 10 seconds. You're like, it's 11:30. What are we doing? Like that.
And in Rap World, we would get this on everything. Like, this is so
I
great.
didn't say everything. No, hold on. That's nonsense. I did not say everything. I said, look, at minimum, every consumer product, because we know consumers suck at doing that. There's a part of me that says, and I know you guys are like half joking about this, but there is a part of me that says, you know what? I'm going to go the Chrome route, where I'm going to ask you, like, quietly out of the way, going to ask you nicely. Then I'm going to get more annoying. This is I'll give you a perfect analogy. This is my cat when she wants to play. Every cat I've ever had when they want to play. They'll at first stare at you from across the room with that, like, you know what I want, let's go. And then, you're happily typing away and you ignore them. Then they come over and sit next to you. You're like, yeah, I can still ignore this. Then they jump up on your lap. And you're like, all right, I can pet you every 30 seconds and keep typing, pet you a little bit, keep typing. And then they're like, this isn't going to work for me, Bob. And they just come in and sit on your hands on the keyboard. And you're like, okay, I have no choice now, right? And the cat either becomes a projectile or you decide you're going to go do the thing that the cat's asking you to do. So there's got to be a limitation on some of these things. Now, would I recommend we do this same approach with, say, things like critical infrastructure? Me, probably not, because hopefully there's somebody watching it. But what if there isn't? That's my question, guys.
I think.
What if there isn't?
Well, first I want to say something real quick on the whole Chrome thing, because I will tell you, nothing peeves me more than sitting in a meeting and seeing somebody in security presenting, and that thing says red.
Yeah.
If you are security and your browser says you have not updated and you're in critical condition, it
I should be able to walk you for that.
But flipping back to the other side, right? Like, it's an interesting aspect, right? Because, like, to your point, light bulbs, things that don't really have a UI to them, we're not going out. Like my thermostat, it's not like I'm going out to my thermostat all the time checking to see if there's updates to be able to apply those. But at that same point, if you're doing auto updates, because, hey, wow, we really want to make sure that we're pushing these updates because people need them. So we have, like, the software has to be able to update itself, because we're not going to go check all these devices. But as Jeff pointed out earlier, right, like, one of the attack vectors that we have here when we talk about these devices that connect out through the APIs, which is what all these are doing, is I just go attack that vendor, right, and I push it down through, and oh, wow, I corrupted the update service, and I just bricked every device that just updated. And there's no getting it back, right? Like, think about your light switch. Like, you brick that thing, you might as well toss it. Like, you're not going to hook a USB cable up to that thing and all of a sudden save it So now take that to your smart meter that they've just installed, its update. And now you got no electricity with no meter, to pull that. So how do you start working that route to be able to say, okay, I need to have updates, but they need to be supported? And really, honestly, I mean, in my opinion, the biggest risk there is the vendor getting compromised, right, and pushing down a bad update, because these devices, unlike Windows Server, I'm going to go Windows, but there's plenty of others that do the same thing, right? These are small devices with very small code bases of, I don't have to support everything. I'm more of like the Mac guy here, right? I can push an update. It's a pretty good chance it's going to go okay. Versus Windows, where I'm supporting every graphics card and every thing that you could possibly put in there. So 80% of the people I'm going to push to have done something to screw this update up for me. Like, there should be a higher level of acceptance to the updates on your light switch.
Listen, I got to say, what's the if we're realistic, really honest with ourselves, what's the higher likelihood? The Apple or Microsoft central update server getting compromised, or one of our users screwing something up?
Yeah, but we're not talking about Apple and Microsoft servers here. We're talking about, Joe Schmo who created a teddy bear out there for your kid to talk to, and it shares all the information, right? Like,
those are all created by the People's Republic of China. It's okay that they blink every once in a while.
I'm just saying, 95% of the devices that people are getting and going and put on their networks after this,
okay, that's fair,
are not Microsoft and Apple or Google, right? They are some other vendor that, who knows what the heck they're doing, like that. And isn't that what we always say? Like, yeah, I'm not going to go target Microsoft, or I'm not going to go target your bank, right? I'm going to go target the small little vendor that works with your bank.
And so every avenue is a pathway into the bigger net. This is the Jeff. This is the classic third-party risk problem. At which point in your how do you tier your third-party risk problem program so that you eliminate as much of the problem as possible? Do you go to fourth party, fifth party? How far do you go? And the answer has to be, if you're being anything but realistic, the answer has to be, like, we do our best and hold our breath, because there's no good answer to that.
Oh, well, I 100% agree. And I think that, that slope of who you trust has changed dramatically. When you're thinking about the teddy bear app, as James mentioned, that's probably in like risk vector number 1. Like, teddy bear app is going to kill us all. But then we go into like, risk vector, what we would believe as like the lowest risk is things like Microsoft and the things like, hopefully Google and people like that. Hopefully that's our lowest risk vector. Although over time, we've seen that that's changed quite a bit. I mean, let's look at the SolarWinds breach. I mean, that was something where for most customers that are out there, that was a risk vector, basically no risk at all to their organization. And, we see technologies like that all the time. And, those things are going to continue to get attacked. If you want to attack a large multinational bank, you're probably not going to go after a teddy bear app. Because I'm just doubting there's probably a lot of those robotic teddy bears sitting in your local branch bank. That's probably just not it.
Bring your kid to work day. It's all scheduled. They're going to bring the teddy bear with them. I got to have this work. You're going to connect it to the Wi-Fi. Game over.
Yep, and then it can auto-update. You could bring your TV to work too. It could auto-update while you're watching your novella. Like, Raf doesn't understand, like, he minimizes this importance, but when I watch my novellas every single day at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, if that thing updates in the middle of novella, like, what am I going to do? You can't go back. Like, I've already seen the first 32 minutes of the show. What am I going to do? It's novella time. But in all seriousness, you think about these risk profiles, and I think this is the piece that's hard is, all of us think about platforms and technologies with risk. And we have, regardless of what we've done over time, all of us choose to put a risk in based on our experience. And I think this is one of the things that all of us wrestle with is, I have certain platforms that I'm more willing to put in with less scrutiny. And I think all of us do this.
Yeah.
And, we do that because we're running at 80 miles an hour every single day. everybody in security, it's not like you have all the time in the world. You don't have like all this unlimited time where if someone comes in and says, hey, I want to do this new application, you don't have 4.5 weeks that you can just sit and analyze the manufacturer of the application and understand how they push code. That doesn't exist. You're looking for, do they have a SOC 2? Do they have an ISO? Do they have some type of security methodology? Or are they a reputable company that I've ever heard of? And if those things all pass muster, you're kind of going down the path of, okay, well, what's the risk we have if this application gets pushed in, or this widget, or this IoT device, or whatever it is? And if that kind of passes muster, you're kind of clicking go. And I know it sounds always terrible, but it's the reality of what happens every single day. And in this world where we have more and more devices coming in, that's going to happen more often. You can't, if someone wants to come in with 1,000 different IoT devices into your infrastructure, the reality is for most organizations other than the largest, it's kind of going to be a pass-fail type of thing, and it's going to be a 2-hour analysis of which you have no idea where the code comes from. You have no idea where the hardware comes from. You have no idea that there's a hidden LTE backdoor in this device that no one's ever told you about, that it magically talks to the People's Republic. You have no idea.
That wasn't on the vendor assessment? That wasn't on the questionnaire?
It wasn't. They were like, line item 42, hidden LTE backdoor. Delete, send that to the customer.
They're like, no, that wasn't on the SIG Lite. That was on the full SIG. I apologize for that. I didn't get that forward. But it's really true. I mean, there's, and I think it's more of like an industry recognition too. When you think of something like a Microsoft, an Apple, a Google, an Amazon, right? Like you're going to be more apt to say, yeah, I'm going to trust that, because they're kind of like, listen, if they get breached, like that's a problem everywhere. Even like to a SolarWinds thing, right? Like we understand the risk there, but even at the end, yeah, you're going to accept those first. Then you've got the million other vendors that give you questionnaires. You answer, like you review them, and it's like everybody says the same thing. Yep, I got an SDLC. Yep, I do this. But I mean, really, what do we know about anything that you're doing? We're not scanning the code. We're just, did you do it this way? Yep, I did it. Right? We're taking their word for it. And quite honestly, if they lied about it, probably nothing's going to happen anyway. Right? I mean, oh, they told us they did this. Okay. I mean, same thing with your SOC 2s and all these different things. Like, ooh, like, great, you had this thing done. It really doesn't matter in a lot of that stuff. It's more of just okay, I'm bringing this in. What does it do? Where does it have to sit? And what should I be doing around this device to make sure that I don't care who it came from? How are we protecting ourselves to help mitigate risk that could come from this? Like, are you talking out to something? Are you doing this? But, I think it's just a challenge everybody's had for a long time, is how do we deal with all these different things? And we put so much time and effort into looking at all these stuff and the 1,000 question, forms that come across with all these different answers to really, in the end, just kind of make a best guess of, it feels good or it doesn't feel good. Right?
Oh, I totally agree. And, you bring up an interesting thing that we should do at some point for a topic for a conversation, which is SDLC in the era of downloadable GitHub. Because what happens so often is with SDLCs, everybody marks that they have an SDLC, but the reality is an SDLC could be nothing more than, I went out to Google, searched for a code snippet, grabbed all the code snippets, tied them all together, grabbed all these individual packages, tied them all together. Well, that is by virtue an SDLC. It's probably not the best one, and I don't think for anybody listening, if you're new to software, you probably shouldn't do that. But if you do, you can mark on your SIG that you do have an SDLC, which will be good.
Yeah. You guys took this in a different direction. So I was being quiet. So you guys took us in a slightly different direction than I was thinking, but all of that is valid. I think, listen, I think the more devices we dump in, the strategy, here's the bottom line. The more devices that get dumped in, whether it's on the personal network at home, in commercial situations, Starbucks, whatever, on, your home, your hotel Wi-Fi, whatever those things is. or at the corporate office, virtual corporate office. More and more, the orderly scan, identify issues, apply patching, rinse and repeat. Like more and more, that methodology is starting to drift out of things that are possible if we want sanity in our networks. Because you just maybe some of those things you can't get into, maybe some of those things you can't remotely apply patches to. Some of them weren't even designed to do that for. Some of them you don't actually own. Like all these different things. And I look at hospitals. I look at retail locations. I look at the freaking elevator that I was riding the other day that is sensitive to so it'll play ads as you're in the elevator. Since you have to touch your key, room key, to be able to push a button, it says as you do it, good afternoon, good evening, whatever, your name, asks you about how was your stay. I hope your stay was pleasant, blah blah blah. And I imagine it can do other things in there, right? There's some vendors telling the hotel operator, man, we could just do a whole bunch of things if you just tie all their records in with this badging, and we can go do lookups for them. I mean, these things are real. None of it's great none of it's great for us, I think, is what I'm thinking. But there's a shift. There's a shift that's happening right now where I think we are over the tipping point where we can effectively do this, do security on these things, do management on these things in a meaningful way without engaging different processes in a massive third-party effort.
Don't worry, Raf. That infotainment center in the elevator is completely segregated from the control center of the elevator. I promise you, it's completely segregated, just like the infotainment system on the airplanes, right?
Easy there.
What interesting enough, though, because I think the elevator is actually a good example of this, right? Is we haven't really talked about the control that these devices have, kind of how they force us into where we put them on our network. Because take the homing network, for example, right? Like everybody always said, like, have your network and then have your guest network and put all your IoT devices on your guest network and do all this stuff. Well, then you find out that your device, it doesn't work on the guest network because it has to talk to the other devices that it pairs with on the regular network, and the guest network doesn't let you see anybody else, right? So you're forced into, I can't put it on the segregated guest network. It has to be on the main network. And so translate that into like this elevator environment, right? Like, oh, well, I want this to be able to talk to my other systems to be able to, pull this information from the badge system. And maybe it's going to talk to elevator 2 and elevator 3. And now all of a sudden I can't segregate it and say, oh, I just want it on here. It has, like, it's almost like the devices force us into breaking down that recommended best practice of separate the network to force it.
Yeah, you just identified something that's interesting, because as much as we want to put things like the Chromecast and certain devices out into a IoT network, and God knows I've got a couple of separate Wi-Fi IoT type networks, but if you want to be able to screencast to it, you have to be on the same, or manage it, you have to be on the same Wi-Fi network. You're like, well, crap. So, like, we haven't thought through these things when we create these devices and create the functionality. And so, all right, we can talk for another hour, but I think this is we got to end this at some point. And Jeff, you've got this look on your face like you're either bored or you're just over what I'm saying.
Oh, no, I'm just excited because I feel like for the end of 2023, for everybody getting this as their Christmas episode, like, this is just a great way to summarize 2023 all in. It's like when you're walking down the street and you see a dumpster fire, and you see that dumpster fire and you watch it burn everything that was in the dumpster fire, and then after you come by and you see the kind of remnants of it, I feel like this episode is like the remnants of the dumpster fire. So we look at everything that's kind of happened in 2023, all the security risks, all the vulnerabilities, all the catastrophes where people decide to push code just randomly, and they guess, and we deploy networks that have no mentality or methodology and just allow everything to communicate because it allows us to do faster things. And we deploy everything in microservices in the cloud because it allows us to go faster, and we don't build security wrappers around it because it's in the cloud, so it's inherently secure. And so we do all those things, and like at the end of the year, you get an episode like this about how our children are now going to ruin our lives in addition to our workforce. And now we're going to have all these new IoT devices, which are going to take over our home and then probably cause our furnace to shut off in the middle of the winter, and we're going to freeze and all this stuff. So that's really what I got from this episode, and I hope everybody else got such a positive aspect of
that was like a true AI recap right there. I feel like, it
was.
Actually, AI. I think Jeff wrote some code. This doesn't feel right.
I think there was hallucinations in that.
Maybe I'm ChatGPT 11. No one knows.
Oh boy. Well, listen. I'm going to. I'm definitely going to do a year-end close up, and so this is not the last episode of the year. We're going to do a year-end wrap up. And Jeff, I definitely want you on that because again, there's just nothing says optimism like Jeff Snark, and so Jeff's the most optimistic man in cyber. Do you know that, Jim?
No.
Mr. Jim.
No one who's ever listened to this goes, Jeff is optimistic.
No, nobody's ever said that. That's true. James, I don't think you'd belabor that either. I think he is 100% not the most. But that's okay. It's going to be fun.
It's not optimist or pessimist. It's just realist, and I can appreciate
that's the scary part.
I respect that.
That's the scary part.
I just been to the rodeo 30 times. I know what's going to happen.
Oh, jeez. All right. Well, all right, folks. Thanks for joining us on this one. We hope you've had a good 2023. Our hopes are clearly very high for 2024 because everything, as Louis C.K. once said, everything's amazing, but yet nobody's happy. And I don't think anything's changing. So, but I'm going to save all that optimism for our end of year episode. So watch X, the thing formerly known as X, Twitter, whatever. I have or Threads or our LinkedIn page for more details on that. If you'd like to play along, this one will be mandatory drink in hand because we're going to have some fun. So stand by, and until next time, we'll see you guys another time, another place.